We're going to drop 2 Kristen videos in a row. This one is called Silent Parents, Enablers, Victims, or Accomplices. I don't have a great idea of what this one is, so I'm going to hopefully talk less and let it play more. Kristen, it seems very smart. All right, let's jump into this.
Hi everyone, I am Kristen Alberts and I am a trauma counsellor specialising in recovery from familial abuse. Let's just get this out of the way as always. No contact is never a first resort, and it certainly doesn't happen overnight and for no reason. And one of the reasons it doesn't happen overnight is because of the tie to one parent who isn't as bad as the other. I'm going to base this video on the mother, the wife, being the centre of the problems, with the father, her husband, who stays silent, simply because it's a situation I relate to, and the majority of the information I get from the forums and support groups for parents of estranged children is from the wives.
I'm going to pause it there, and now the title makes so much more sense. That's so rough. You have 2 parents, one of which is a problem. What does that make the other one? And we can get into very specific situations, right? And we have to understand whether or not the other parent is also a victim. Because there are so many times, again, it takes 7.5 times on average for a person to leave their abuser. If as a parent, your abuser is the other parent, that is also going to negatively affect your child. And I've said this a couple of times on stream and maybe even in the videos. There are plenty of things that I can rationally blame my mother for in my childhood. The physical abuse she also took from my dad is not one of those things. And I don't know if she ever would have left if he wasn't arrested. But I'm never going to blame her for that. I'm never going to blame her for not having money. Like, those are things that I will not touch. Those are things that just affect such a large group of people. And she is as much of a victim as I was of my father's physical abuse. And we can leave that there. Now, there was a story on Raised by a Narcissist where a woman talked about how her mom was super mentally abusive, but she was really nice to her sibling, the golden child. And then the dad was not emotionally abusive, but because it didn't affect him, he didn't care enough to do anything. He never spoke up for the child. He just let it happen, which I think is as much of a problem. As a parent, I think your biggest responsibility in your family is to protect your children. We can get into wild conversations here. In the same way that if my partner did something to my dog, I'd be gone. You have to protect your child from your spouse. And we've had the conversation on stream where people can sometimes change after marriage or children for whatever reason. And it sucks, and nobody wants to get divorced. Nobody wants to be part of the 50%. And everybody has this idea that, oh, once I'm married, that's it. I'm not going anywhere. We'll talk it out. We'll figure it out. But there are things to where that cannot apply. If you get married now, and in 10 years, your spouse and you have kids, and they, who have never touched you, who have never laid hands on anyone, start abusing your child, how much of a conversation is that before you leave?
The situation is the other way around, please go ahead and reverse it. I hear this day in and day out. I know I need to cut contact with my mom, but I love my dad and I am terrified of what it might do to our relationship. These adult children have been hanging on for years, if not decades, trying to find ways to put out the fires and keep the peace with their mothers to protect their relationships with their fathers, until eventually their mother's escalating spite culminates in something so atrocious that no contact is the unavoidable and inevitable result.
I wonder if we'll get into the talking about the siblings here. A lot of my TikTok is like the AI voices of Reddit stories. And the one that I actually listened to this morning, a woman whose brother had just been broken up with by his longtime girlfriend. So the brother took that out on the woman in front of her husband. Her husband took the brother aside and said, "Don't do that." The brother went back to the wife and said some wild things. The husband takes him aside and just punches him in the face and knocks him out. Little drastic? Sure, but you'd be stupid to think I wouldn't do the same thing for my partner. They leave, and later on, the mother invites the daughter over. The daughter and the husband show up together to their dismay of the parents, but no, like you're not going to corner one of them. You're just not. And so the mother goes, okay, you're choosing either your family or your husband. And that's such a dumb thing to do as the mom. Like, you saw it happen. There was not like an altercation for no reason. And also you should have reeled in your son. You should have absolutely reeled in your son. And this is what the husband says. And the husband looks at the father and goes, what would you do if someone spoke like that about your wife to you or to them? And the husband goes, well, I would never make it physical. Like I would have a talking to. But like the husband did that. The husband warned them. And then after that, that is 100% the brother's fault. 100% the brother's fault. And so to now have a mother who is making you choose between your family and your husband because of something that is your family's fault, and a father who is at the very best complicit, probably an enabler. That is just a dumb place to be in. And you can't go off of people because you have a mother making an ultimatum. You have a brother who won't even look them in the eye. You have a father who's complicit versus your husband, who, I'm going to be so real, did the right thing. It could be for a multitude of reasons. It could be different people in your family. I'm so big on taking your partner's side because you made a choice to put that person in your family. And if your partner's wrong, okay, figure that out. But in this situation, it's not a question. If I had a family and they did that to my partner, I would choose to not have a family.
What happens next goes one of two ways. The only difference is the length of time it takes. Sometimes the father will try to continue to have a relationship with his child without his wife. But every time he visits, FaceTimes, or even texts his child without her, the resultant huffs, tantrums, or all-out fits and screaming matches with his wife get worse and worse. The father then realizes this is never going to work. But instead of making his wife behave, his solution is to make his child behave.
There's a big difference in your child being a child and an adult here, because when they're an adult, you don't have to come home to them. And so it seems so much easier to keep the peace in your own home than to try and do what's probably the right thing. You want a relationship with your child outside of your house, and you want to be able to come home to peace. That's a hard line to figure out. If you're seeing this happen to your child that still lives with you, then I cannot imagine not taking your child aside and trying to protect them. But then when your child's an adult and they may not have the best relationship with your wife or your husband, your spouse, you really just want to come home and not be in a fight. I personally don't think I could be married to a person like that. I couldn't marry that personality. I couldn't stay married to that personality. If you are someone who's going to start a fight with me because I'm spending time with our child, maybe I'm better off alone.
And by behave, I mean persuade his child to give mom another chance, saying that she doesn't mean the things she says, that she was provoked, and that they must all try to understand where she is coming from.
If you can be provoked into saying something you don't mean, I don't trust you not to mean that.
All this does is cut his child even deeper, and it certainly doesn't do anything to change things, let alone to fix them. The somewhat gentler tactic usually doesn't last long anyway, as Dad moves swiftly onto fury and accuses his child of being heartless, childish, and totally irrational for breaking his wife's heart over nothing. It is from here that we can split these fathers into two clear camps, those who support their children and those who don't. Tragically, very, very few fit into the first camp, which I'll get to later. The second camp, the fathers who choose their wives over their children, hurt their children in ways they never dreamed possible and never saw coming. These children have long suspected that there is something wrong with their relationships with their mothers. They've almost learned to expect their mother's viciousness, or at least see it coming. And the constant damage control that has formed a part of their daily lives for so long.
This is entirely different. I saw a clip, it might have been from Jimmy Kimmel, where they took people on the street and they asked them, your mom, your wife, your daughter, they're all hanging off a cliff. You can only save two of them. Which two do you save, and in what order? Surprisingly, a lot of people said their mom and then their daughter. And then I went into the comments because if you would ask me that question, I'd have said my daughter and then my wife. I went into the comments and so many of them were like, your wife first, your wife first, your wife first, your wife first. And I'm not saying it's wrong. I obviously don't know. I don't understand the perspective because I feel like I was under the assumption that your child should come first in every situation. But I guess I'm wrong and I don't understand why. It's one of those things that I haven't looked too deep into or thought about too much because, again, I don't want kids. Like, I don't have a yearning for children. I've never wanted them and I don't think I ever will. So it's not something that I assume is ever going to affect me. So it's not a choice for me. Like if it's my mom, a child I don't have, and my partner, I'm saving my partner. That's not a conversation I need to have. But I was very much wondering why, and this is normally something we'd get into on stream and that would be cut out of the video, but why why were the comments so adamant about saving your partner before your child? Because again, I was under the assumption that like your kid comes first in any situation. And then your partner because you chose them, and then your mother as a default. If you're marrying someone that you would not choose, like I get that your mom probably raised you and probably did a good job, but you're going out into the world and finding a partner, not a light version of your mother. So I don't understand the choosing of your mother over your partner. I could have just played the clip.
It's just become second nature to keep picking up the pieces. But their fathers are their heroes, or at the very least the one parent they believe they can trust. When their fathers turn their backs on them only to take the side of the last person on earth who should have hurt them, they are utterly blindsided. Most don't even expect their fathers to do anything about their mothers trying to destroy their lives, their marriages, and their relationships with their own children. They just want their fathers to understand that it can't continue.
Yes, that is such a good point. Most of these people bringing it up to one of their parents does not expect that parent to change anything or do anything about it. They just want a little bit of understanding. I'm not making this up, right? Like my mom switched the lock of my bedroom and would lock me in there for days. You don't always expect your dad to be like, oh, I should leave her. Or, oh yeah, I'm going to make sure she remembers that. You kind of just want to be like, yeah, that sucked. Can't believe you made it out of that. People just want community and understanding and for your community to understand.
It's when they refuse that these children are more hurt, confused, and devastated by what their fathers are putting them through than by what their mothers ever could. And their wives are only too smug to share the juicy details. Here are some quotes I've collected. She wanted to keep her father in her life, and she thought he would side with her, but he said she's not blackmailing me, the crocodile tears don't work. My husband told our daughter, if you don't see your mother, you won't see me. My daughter knows that her father stands by me because that's the way it should be. If she dared call him, he would tell her to stop being a rotten, spoiled brat. My husband told my son to leave rather and make his own life because he feels like if he's totally gone, he can deal with that easier. Mine also keeps out of everything. My daughter backed the wrong horse because he likes his peace and his quiet. Our daughter thought she knew him. She didn't. My husband won't do anything he doesn't want to. My husband doesn't want any part of it. He is angry with her because she stopped me seeing our granddaughter, which he knows is just petty and ridiculous. My husband is the same. Our daughter thought my husband would take her side, but boy, was she wrong. There is very little involvement on these groups from the fathers. The mothers chalk it up to men not wanting to talk about their feelings, but the impression I get is that they don't have any. Very soon after the last altercation they have with their children, they tell their wives to drop it, and they simply get on with their lives. My husband told me that he's not discussing this again. Our son has made his choice, and that's the end of it. Mine says we've gotten through problems before and we'll just get through this one too.
Here's a problem among men, and I'm not any better than this. We don't always have a problem doing chores, taking out the trash, doing the dishes, laundry, but we need to be told to start those things. We need to be told that we need to do something, and then we need to be told again the next week. If that's who you are as a person, because it's who I've been as a person, that is something you need to break out of. You need to take initiative. You need to be more active as a person in someone else's life. Unwilling to see the side of your child because you just don't want any issues, or because you don't want to have to feel, or because you're not being asked to do anything by your wife. You're not being asked to make a choice, you're just not going to, is gross. If it's actually petty and you can let them sort it out themselves, sure. But if it gets to this point, then that's no longer where you're at. It is not enough to exist and be willing to do the things that dads do and that husbands do. You need to actually do them without being asked to do so. And that's not going to work, coming home, opening 6 Coronas and sitting in front of a TV. That is being a good husband. That is being a good parent. That is having morals, teaching them to your kids, and not just doing it by using your words. I guarantee you that these parents, these dads, aren't people who are void of opinions. They're void of a reason to act on them. And you don't need one as a person. You don't need a reason to back your morals. Just do it. Is it work? Sure, but so is everything. If you're going to make a child, then you need to be willing to do the work that is being a parent. And sometimes that may be taking the side of your kid over your spouse. Whether they're 5, 10, 15, or 25. It is disgusting to see how many people are so content existing in a space so long as they are not disturbed. If you are alone in a 1-bedroom apartment and you don't have a family you want to deal with, sure, fine, this isn't about you. This is about the parent who is not actively abusing their child siding with the abuser because they don't want any issues. It must be so nice to be willing to just pass on any sort of conflict because it doesn't affect you. And then it must feel a little gross to know that the way that your child is treated doesn't affect you.
My husband won't talk about this any further. He says it's just another chapter in our lives. My husband doesn't care. He says we can't trust her again, and that's all there is to it. I'm hurt and upset. Hubby is more quiet, pissed and angry. My husband really doesn't care. The only time I've seen the fathers contribute anything on these forums is when it comes to changing the will. While their wives are pouring their toxic little hearts out on social media, their husbands are making appointments with their attorneys to have the offending child disinherited. Now, let's have a look at the first camp, the fathers who do support their children. As I said, tragically, very few fathers fall into this camp, but when they do, the breakdown of their marriages happens hard and fast. These forums call these fathers traders, and they waste no time telling themselves and each other to get rid of them immediately.
Again, I get it. I get not wanting issues at home, but make a choice. Make a choice. If you're in this situation, make a choice. If my partner was abusive towards my dog, that's such an easy choice to make. And I am so in love with my partner. She is the most wonderful person I've ever met. And there's not a negative thing I could make up to say about her. But in this situation where I'm forced to make a choice, it is a very easy one for me to make. If you're a father and your first thought here is, oh, you know what? I'm not going to get involved. I am, however, going to punish my child by removing them from my will. Congrats. You said you were not going to be a part of it, but instead you were just a bad dad.
The irony is that these fathers have no intention of sticking around. They have left and filed for divorce before their wives have had a chance to even broach the subject, but their wives tell a very different story. You need a new husband. How dare he contribute to your pain? Your husband needs to give up his privilege and stand with you. He needs to demand that you get to see them too, or he will not.
Ew.
This is just another betrayal. Cruel and shady, you are being emotionally and mentally abused, gaslighted and bullied by both your child and your husband. That man should treat you as his queen. He has chosen his daughter over his queen, and that's weird and not right. He is choosing your enemy over you. Not acceptable. He needs to grow a pair, be a man, and stand up for his woman. Change the locks next time he goes to visit her. Make him ask your permission to access what is his. Let the air out of his tires. Stop doing any kind of tasks like laundry or meals. Change every password and put a digital deadbolt on the bedroom door. Your husband is helping your son abuse you by agreeing to have a relationship with him. He is a spineless puke. This is abuse, and you need to get out now. Find your nearest DV shelter and get out for your own good. Husbands support wives. Even if he doesn't agree with the situation, it's irrelevant. What happened to his wedding vows? I would cut both cancers, my child and my...
If you put, I will support you through you abusing our child in your wedding vows, nuts. I can't. Nobody can help you from there. You are on your own.
My husband out of my life. If this isn't bad enough, it gets far worse. The same way, these forums come up with their own jargon for their husbands, the traders, in that they trade their wives for their children.
Ew.
They've also come up with a name for the children who want a relationship with one parent and not the other. They call these children splitters, in that they split their parents up for their own gain. And
That was a lot more PG than I thought it was going to be.
in the same way, they prefer to invent their own reasons for why their children go no contact, which we discussed in the previous video. They prefer to invent their own reasons for their children being splitters as well. These reasons happen to be far more sickening than the ones they invent for no contact. Splitters can, of course, be sons, but these quotes refer to their daughters. Brace yourselves. She is jealous of you. That's why she is purposely splitting you up. This is a betrayal. She knows this has caused problems between him and I, and she enjoys it. Anything to make life harder for me is a joyful thing for her. It's like he's cheating. It's humiliating. It is like an affair because it's a betrayal of your unity.
I really hate the way any of this sounds like a romantic relationship. I hate it. I hate when the mothers refer to like their estrangement as like a breakup or being dumped, or, oh, he's cheating on you by choosing to have a relationship with his daughter. You could not think of another way to say that. That doesn't sound like you were jealous of a relationship. I was not going to put the word romantic in there, between your partner and your child. I'm going to be so real. If I had a child and for whatever reason, my relationship with them did not work out, I would still very much hope that they could have a relationship with my partner. That makes me want to puke.
Is fulfilling your daughter's childish fantasies of winning daddy from mommy. Your daughter's goal is to break the two of you up so she can have him all to herself.
Consider that it's just not about you. It's just not about you. Not everything is about you.
This is classic basic psychology. You know the one where the 5-year-old girl wants to marry her daddy? Well, with you out of the picture.
If you take a Psych 105 class, a generic Psych 105 class, read about Freud, and then said, oh, this applies to everything, you did not get very deep into psychology. No, not every little girl wants to marry her dad. Not every little boy wants to marry his mother. That's weird. Some guy thought about that a long time ago because he had a mommy issue. That shouldn't apply to you.
She has his undivided attention, and he's allowed it. The marriages of the second camp, the fathers who don't support their children, go on to last for years, with their wives claiming that their marriages are stronger than ever, and that their children's antics and their husband's refusal to tolerate them has actually brought them closer together. The marriages of the first camp, the fathers who do support their children, disintegrate extremely quickly, with the timeline between no contact and divorce being as little as 3 months. My point is, it doesn't take long for these fathers to accept that their wives are never going to do anything about their atrocious behavior, and their wives make their decision even easier by handing them that what must be the lowest ultimatum ever, your marriage or your children.
I'll talk about the other one for a second. I don't want to get too deep into it, but one of the big reasons why this could lead to relationships lasting longer and marriages becoming stronger is because you found a common enemy. You found something that you have in common. And that's probably not something you've done since you've had kids. Like, so many of these marriages are just stagnant and they don't have anything new in common. They don't do anything. So the fact that they've now found something to do together, congratulations. I hope that it works out. Leave your kids alone.
Any man or woman who doesn't see how repulsive it is to expect a parent to abandon a hurt child has more wrong with them than the parent with the ultimatum.
Yes.
So obviously, these fathers immediately stop trying to mediate or find ways to see their children without their wives and go on to have much happier, healthier relationships with their children and their grandchildren, which, as you can imagine, pisses their wives off no end, who in true toxic style add their now ex-husbands to their smear campaigns by telling everyone who will listen that their husbands are abusive and that they have no idea why their children would choose their abusive fathers over their loving mothers who did nothing to deserve it. All this does is provide further proof that these mothers are never ever going to take one iota of responsibility for the mess they caused and only have themselves to blame for. In the previous videos, we saw how these mothers went from calling their children sweet and loving and caring to heartless, abusive psychopaths, all in the same thread. When their husbands finally decide to do what they were supposed to do and stand up for their children, these now ex-wives simply repeat the process. All of a sudden, husbands who have never raised a hand to their wives and have provided well for their families become drunken, abusive, good-for-nothing layabouts who like to hurt these women for no reason, just like their awful children. The children who are left in the dust by their fathers face unimaginable pain and abandonment and rejection they don't even know how to begin to process. Most of these adult children were convinced that if they could just get their fathers to see how their mothers were hurting them, that they'd understand. Some even dared to hope that their fathers might have even helped them. A
big reason why a lot of people have estranged moms and then by consequence estranged dads too, instead of the other way around, is because fathers, and we get to see a lot of it here, are pretty complicit. They don't want to take a first-hand responsibility in raising their children over these problems. And Diane tried to pass it off too, right? I'm not even that political. That was probably an issue between her and my husband, Ted. But everything went through Diane. The videos went through Diane. The letter that was sent to Diane went through Diane. Everything went through her. And what happened with Ted was just a consequence of what was going on with Diane. When they were sick, the daughter, and I guess I could just call her Haley, we know her first name, did call Ted, and they had a very short conversation. That was not a grace given out to Diane. And we later learned through the videos that Ted is just as bad of a person. Ted has terrible ideas, but he gets to take a step back. He doesn't have to be an active parent, which is stupid. Again, you should get home and you should do your chores as a man, as a spouse, without having to be reminded to. You should raise your children without having to be asked to change their diapers. How many of those stories have we heard where mothers are so afraid to leave their babies with their dads because their dads won't do anything unless asked to? I cannot leave my infant with their dad for more than 4 hours because if my infant goes to the bathroom, he's not going to change their diaper. How terrifying is that? There's an entire genre of mothering where on TikTok, moms will be like, all right, I'm going to leave my baby with the dad, with my husband, and we're going to see how it goes. And the dad just will hold the child right up to the mother, because if that thing pukes, if that thing cries, if that thing has to eat, if that thing poops, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend I'd be any better, but I don't ever have to know. I don't ever have to be a dad. As a partner, I'm happy to do all the things now that I wouldn't when I was younger without being asked to. It sucks that we have so many men who aren't. These are the same men that are like, oh no, I don't have to know my kids' teachers' names. I don't have to know their doctors' names. I don't have to know their birthdays or when their doctor's appointments are. I go to work. And then it pans over to the mom and is like, yeah, I also work full time. Maybe you could have used that excuse in the 70s and the 60s and the 50s. Maybe in the whatever time you were supposed to live off of one income. That's not a thing now. Either work 2 jobs or raise your kid. Pick one. And don't complain about it.
All this comes crashing down. It is a pain like no other, because now they have to deal with not only their mother's abuse, but the fact that their fathers allowed it to happen, and the fact that their fathers wanted to continue, often for no other reason than to shut their wives up. For a parent to force a child to take continuous abuse and then to punish and then reject that child for wanting it to stop is something that is nearly impossible to process. Children are biologically wired to need their parents' protection. Without it, they face exposure, starvation, and death. These children are so desperate for at least one parent to love them that they attribute traits and characteristics, sometimes entire personalities, that their fathers don't possess. Then they excuse, justify, and explain away his silence, absence, ignorance, and indifference to the way their mothers treat them, and convince themselves that he really does love them, even though he's unable to show it. He's busy, he's stressed, he has his own more important problems to deal with. He comes from a generation that's uncomfortable talking about their feelings, but he's still the daddy they can trust. Often these children believe that their fathers are just as much a victim as they are, that their mothers henpeck their fathers so badly that their dads are just as scared of these women as they are, that the reason he doesn't do anything is because he doesn't want to make things worse. Even if this were true, in most cases it's not, by the way. Most of these fathers have no problem standing up to their wives when it's in their best interest too. But even if it were true, it's the most pathetic excuse I've ever heard. A father's first and foremost responsibility as a parent is to protect his children. We live in a society that still blames battered women for not leaving their abusive husbands. But here we are making excuses for grown men who, for the most part, have far more strength, resources, and support than most women do, who choose to stay with women who abuse their children while they do nothing about it.
We talked about that in the last video, and I'm just going to make sure that we clarify on this so nobody's blaming anyone by mistake. She's 100% not blaming the women. The women in that situation are victims. We're good there. She is saying that we live in a society that will criticize those victims for not getting out sooner, but not criticize the men in the relationship for not being victims, but victimizing themselves.
If the information on the parent forums is anything to go by, these fathers are not scared or trying not to make things worse. They simply don't care. Child rearing and whatever their wives get up to has nothing to do with them. It's only when their wives won't stop bitching about their heartless children that they feel the need to get involved at all. But they don't go to the cause of the problem and tell their wives to stop and get help. They try to force their children to endure more abuse so that their wives will pipe down and leave them in peace. And when their children won't obey, they disinherit them and call it a day. We have got to remember that abusive people cannot thrive in a vacuum. All too often I hear, if my mom/dad wasn't so toxic, my family would be fine. And if my mom/dad stopped doing XYZ, our family would be happy. This simply isn't true. If one member was toxic and the rest of the family agreed, they wouldn't put up with it. They'd certainly not enable it. They'd put them in their places whenever necessary. They'd insist that that member stopped upsetting everyone, stopped ruining every family holiday, stopped lying and making everyone walk on eggshells, and to go and get help. The parents, in this case the father, would protect his children the way he should, and his children wouldn't go to the lengths they do to convince themselves that not only is this normal, but that their father is ignoring their abuse to protect them. What makes this so upsetting is how these adult children believe that they should be protecting their relationships with their fathers instead of the other way around. I posted a survey in a support group for women with narcissistic mothers. At the time, the group was over 100,000 strong. When I asked how their relationship with their fathers had fared after they'd gone no contact with their mothers, they reported that their relationship with their fathers had broken down completely, but they all cited their mothers as the reason. Their mothers wouldn't let their fathers see or even talk to them. And if they did talk to them, their mothers made their father's life so difficult that they felt it was their job to stay away from them or try to have secret meetings or phone calls so that their fathers would be protected. It didn't occur to any of them that the protection should have come from the fathers, never the other way around.
Yes.
Not one of them said that their fathers should have stood up to their wives. My next question was to the women whose fathers had stayed with their toxic wives after no contact, but had divorced them years later. How was their relationship now? Every single respondent told me that their relationship was basically non-existent. Some of these fathers had remarried, most to women just as toxic as their first wives were. Some went on to father more children, and thousands of these women had half-brothers and sisters that never even met. But instead of realizing that their father's behavior is inexcusable, they blamed themselves, thinking that their fathers had amazing relationships with the next batch of children, so there must be something wrong with them.
Something that we should talk about is the way that people can honeymoon phase their relationships for a long time. And this is such a scary thought to have. And it goes all the way down to like, I don't care if you get married after 2 weeks or 2 years or even 10 sometimes, you may not know the person you're marrying. One of my biggest red flags that I look for are people who move on from friend group to friend group, who make a lot of really good friends really fast, and then in 3 months have an entirely new group of friends, and a new group of friends, and a new group of friends, and maybe sometimes they carry another person with them. But sometimes it's really easy to hide who you are, or to like seem like a good person for a little while. And in an extended way of the way that we let people talk to show you who they are, sometimes it just takes a little longer. And so when you see people, romantic or not, start relationships, they go really well for a while, start a new relationship, it went really well for a while, and they just like, they're so friendly and they do such a good job of making friends and seeming cool. We want to blame ourselves and be like, oh, I'm the problem then. If they get along with literally everyone else except me, I'm the problem. There's a reason they have to keep moving on before who they are comes out.
These fathers didn't break the cycle and go on to have happy, healthy families. They simply repeated the cycle with the next family, with a whole batch of new children who would all go on to have exactly the same problems the original ones did. My point is, it never occurred to any of these women that the dynamics were bizarrely back to front. Just because one parent is more directly abusive than the other, it doesn't mean that other parent is not abusive. And it certainly doesn't mean that that parent is a hero or a parent that child can trust. It means that that parent condones the way the children are being treated and therefore sees no reason for it to stop. A parent who allows a child to be used and abused and then rejects that child for wanting it to stop does not make that parent a victim or an enabler. It makes that parent an accomplice. And that is why no contact with one parent usually leads to no contact with both. Right, shout out to Beth Aiden for your question on this. Thank you very much. I'll be answering more of your questions on my Patreon, where you can chat to me and see more of my work on handling toxic families and no contact. Patreon.com/Kristen Alberts. See you soon.
I need a call to action. Everyone else has a call to action. I don't need your money. Subscribe. Like the video. Again, do me a favor. Subscribe to Kristen. Maybe even give her videos a view. She is the person who's going through a lot of this work, and for whatever reason, she wants to share it with us. So shout out to her. I do a bad job of introducing myself. My name is Max. I go through a lot of Estranged Parents videos. I go through things on TikTok that make me feel weird or bother me, and I like true crime. So if any of that interests you, consider dropping a sub, like the video, follow on Twitch, Twitter, maybe not Twitter. Follow on Twitch, Twitter, or Blue Sky. All right, get out of here. Go. I have to fill 20 seconds now for like the little box pop-ups that pop here. What is this? Is this a recommended video? Who knows? This is maybe a playlist. This is a subscribe. You can subscribe. We're so close to 3K. other recommended video, maybe.